This is Alexa with the Clinicians Atelier and founder of Care Identity, and I'm really excited to have Monica McKitterick with us here today, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I am a family nurse practitioner, and I own a direct primary care office in the Austin, Texas area. If you don't know what direct primary care means, you're not alone. It's very, very unheard of. It's been around for about almost 20 years at this point. It's just slowly growing. Direct primary care is a membership-based healthcare system. So we are not insurance dependent. We're much like Netflix for your doctor or affordable concierge. And so we just take care of people. We take all the hard stuff out of healthcare and make it easy. So I started that practice about 6 years ago, and yeah, we're thriving and living our best lives.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about when you first started, when you first opened. What did that look like?
Yeah, so I was actually relocating to Texas from New Mexico and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I had been an NP for about 10 years at the time, working in the insurance-based system in all sorts of different places. And I really had a passion for primary care because I was taught to take care of a whole person, but it's exhausting as an insurance-based provider. I would see 30 plus patients a day. I treated them like cattle. It was like, let's see how quickly I can move you in and out, because the guy in the C-suite was always telling me I wasn't doing enough. So I think, my phone was probably listening to me and actually sent me a Facebook ad that said, primary care physician takes home $400,000 a year and is home in time for dinner. And the clickbait got me. And so I clicked on it, and it was all about this model of direct primary care. So I dove in, did a ton of research, went to my husband that has an MBA, and I said, I think I'm going to open my own practice where I can see less patients, take better care of them, have more control of my time, and make the same amount of money. And he laughed in my face, and he was like, Monica, that's not real life. I don't know how you think you're going to do that. So I Googled how to write a business plan because, ChatGPT was not a thing then, wrote a business plan, and then convinced my husband to do it. And so we actually relocated to Texas, and 3 weeks later, I opened my practice. So not only was I opening a practice that nobody had heard of, but I also did not have a following of patients. I had been an NP in New Mexico for 7 years, but nobody in Texas knew me. I literally knew 2 people in all of Central Texas, and they were my in-laws. Yeah, it was very scary. I had no idea what I was doing. Thankfully, my husband is financially stable enough that I could make it 6 months. If I didn't make it within 6 months, then I would have to go become an employed person. And so, yeah, there was a lot of researching on how to start an LLC, how to get a name, a logo, all the things. So I really bootstrapped it. I did my own website. I did all the things as much as I could. So I convinced my husband I needed $20,000 to start it. We probably could have done a little less because every piece of furniture I got was from Craigslist. So I launched it in April 2015, and the whole plan was just to have me and my clinic with my 500 people. I was not hiring anybody. It was just going to be me. And then that quickly changed, and now we're a 3-office location doing our thing. So
let's kind of dive in a little bit. As a family nurse practitioner, tell me a little bit, what does that look like when you're trying to start your practice? I know it's different in every state, but I know you started in Texas. Can you talk a little bit what that process looks like for someone that might be listening that is curious?
Absolutely. So it definitely depends on the state. So there are 26-ish states that allow nurse practitioners to practice independently. Texas is not one of them. I lived in states that were independent practice for the first 10 years, so I didn't have to have a collaborating physician, and now I do, that I'm in the state of Texas. So as a nurse practitioner in Texas, you can open a practice. You just cannot use the word medicine anywhere in your practice. You cannot claim that you practice medicine, which we don't. We practice nursing. That word cannot be on your website, can't be anywhere. Also, if you are the owner of the practice as a nurse practitioner, you can open an LLC in Texas, where if you're a physician, you have to open a PLLC. But also, as the owner of the practice, I cannot hire a physician as a W-2 employee because of state laws, which is very odd. I could hire one as a 1099, which is what our contractor is. So there's just a few rules and regulations. And if you're looking at it in your own state, you definitely need to look into those rules. They're much less restrictive in many states. Texas is a very nurse practitioner restrictive state where others are not. So if you are in one of those free practice states, then you have much less hoops to jump through.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. That's kind of helpful to kind of know what you should look out for. I know you said originally you thought you were just going to be a solo provider with maybe 500 patients. At what point did you start seeing a shift, and what were you doing marketing wise that you felt like maybe growth was on the horizon?
Yeah. So 15 months in was about 6 months into COVID for me. So I opened in April of 2019. So a year later, we were in the depths of COVID. But my practice continued to grow because it was a great opportunity for patients because we already had telehealth. All the telehealth was already included. You could text us. We do 70% of what we do via text message. So we continued to grow through COVID. We did see a little bit of slowdown just because I wasn't able to get out and do networking as much because networking has been a huge proponent to growth in our practice. I know so many people in this town. I've lived in 5 states and I know more people in Texas than all other 5 states combined, just because I've done so much networking and getting out and talking to people. But about 15 months in, I realized that I was becoming burdened with administrative stuff. And so it was just me for the first 15 months. I emptied the trash can, I did the faxes, I did all of the things, everything. And so at that point, I was actually looking for an administrative person to help me with the back end stuff so that I could continue to build. And at that point, I had about 325 patients. And I actually found an NP who was like, hey, I'll come do your admin stuff until you want me to take patients. And so it just kind of worked out that the right person fell into the right place at the time. I actually did not hire a full-time administrative staff until I was 3 years in. My nurse practitioners did all the work first. So that was kind of the tipping point where I realized that my ability to take care of patients was declining because I was spending so much time doing other things. And so I took that off my plate, and then I was able to continue running the business and growing it. I had never intended to hire somebody, but it actually works out really well, especially if you want a day off or you want to go on vacation, because then there's somebody to help cover your patients.
At this point where you are kind of starting to hire your other nurses, just at what point did you decide I am better at the business side and the sales than taking care of the patients? At what point did you kind of make that transition that I rather grow and continue growing versus being so involved on the taking care of patient side?
Sure. I will tell you, I think I never had any intention to step out of the practice. It really happened because what I realized was that as much as I am good at networking and I am good at sales and I am good at marketing, most nurse practitioners are not. It is not in their strengths. And I was trying to force my staff to do it. We had guidelines, like they had to go to this many networking meetings, they had to make this many connections, and they hated it. And so I read a book that was about how you should really focus on people's strengths and not their weaknesses. So it was at that point that I was like, okay, listen, I'm going to keep taking care of my patients, but I will do all the networking for you and all the marketing for you. But that's when I had to hire an administrative person because I could no longer do all of it. And so that was when I hired my full-time administrative person who also did a little bit of marketing, but then we quickly realized she is an ops person. She's really good at it, and I am really good at marketing. So it was when I opened my 3rd location that I realized there was no way that I could continue taking care of 350 patients and run 3 practices, right? Because not only do I have 3 practices, but I have 10 employees. And so dealing with employees and feelings and issues and problems and making sure everybody feels heard takes a lot of time. And so it was at that point that I stepped out and just became the CEO. And so I do all of the visionary stuff, a lot of the marketing. I do have a separate marketing liaison that does some more like setting up tables and things because I am not doing that on a Saturday. I'm not spending 4 hours at a farmer's market. Not going to happen. And so I do have someone else to help me with the marketing side, but that's majority of what I do other than, making sure everybody's still happy and getting payroll paid.
I have good questions now. Are these 3 practices in Austin, or are they just in different parts of Texas?
So they're all in the North Austin area. So there's about 50 miles between 2 of them, and then about 12 miles between the other 2. So 2 are pretty close, and then 1 is kind of out there. The one that's kind of out there wasn't actually in the plan. It just kind of happened. It was actually an insurance-based practice that was going bankrupt, and the provider was either going to sell their soul to a giant conglomerate healthcare system, or she could come join us. And so we transitioned her practice over into a direct primary care office.
That's very interesting. I'm kind of curious. So didn't necessarily buy her practice, or did you buy her practice and then transition her?
So we technically just bought her assets. We didn't buy her practice name because then we have to take the liability with it. She shut down her business and then rebranded with us, and then we basically used her customer list is what we purchased.
And what led you to open the second location? Since I know you said the third one was kind of by accident or wasn't in the plans. So what led you to open the second location originally?
Yeah, direct primary care is a service people want and they need. They just don't know it exists. And so we saw our first office, which is our Cedar Park location, it was just growing and growing and growing. And we're like, man, if we can do this here, we can do this anywhere. And so we decided to open a second location thinking it would grow just like the first one did. And it was a little eye-opening, to be honest. I'm very well known in the Cedar Park area. I'm in a lot of nonprofits. I do a ton of stuff, but this town is 12 miles away and it is a smaller town, and getting my foot in the door there has definitely been a struggle. So it was not nearly as easy as we thought. We actually initially thought, oh, we'll just open a new office every year for the next 10 years and then we'll retire and live happily ever after. And that quickly went away because what I realized is it was my time, my energy, and my face that had to bring in all of these patients. And because people don't know what direct primary care is, there's so much education that goes into it that it's not as easy as just setting up a Google ad. Nobody is Googling direct primary care. And so we really struggle to get people to understand, why would I pay a membership if I have health insurance? Why would I pay for you when this is covered through that? And it's like, well, did you get somebody to answer the phone at that doctor's office? No? Okay, that's why you would pay us. Marketing is a giant struggle. And so we opened the second clinic 2 years ago. It's doing fine. It's just not growing as quickly as our first clinic.
I was curious. I like that, right? Like you learn things through trial and error as well. But I like how you said it was your time in your energy and your face. And I can definitely identify with that. I think in any service type business, service-based industry is when you're so involved, like people want to come because of you. And so I can see where that can be very draining, especially if you have to like go to another place and do all that education and then also create a presence in another location. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Tell me a little bit. I know you said sometimes you do farmers markets, you have someone that helps you with that. Let's talk a little more about the marketing side that led to your growth and what did that look like? And let's start from the beginning on the first practice when you first started.
Yeah, social media was hands down the biggest way we grew. And it wasn't just static posts, it was putting my face everywhere. If you go to my YouTube channel and watch the first video ever made, it is horrifically terrible. It's so bad. I made my whole family leave. It was awful. Now you can put me on camera anytime and I'm fine. It took me a long time to get used to that, but now recording videos is like second nature to me, and that is what people want. So especially in a place where there's so much education required to get them to understand why they would pay for your service. It's not like I'm a massage therapist. People know what massage therapy is. People don't get direct primary care. And so making sure that you speak to their pain point is another problem. Is there's so many benefits to direct primary care, whether it's same day scheduling, online appointments, having the same relationship with somebody, the fact you can text your provider, the affordable cost. There's so many different things that go into it that finding the person's pain point that I'm speaking to and then talking to that pain point and how our practice can benefit that. There's so many different options that it's not like I can have just one elevator pitch. And so it was a ton of just education, getting my face out there. So I did a lot of social media, especially once COVID kicked in, because then I couldn't go out and do people. But there was a lot of networking with local chamber events and networking groups, and whether that's BNI or any other of the networking groups out there. I never joined BNI. It makes me a little nervous, that whole like raise your hand. It's a little too cult like for me, but meeting other people, because not everybody I met needs my services, but they probably know somebody who does. And so it was all about relationship building. And those relationships have been what have built this practice, which is also interesting because that's really the part of healthcare that I loved, was the relationship building with my patients. And so I think that's why I still am so fulfilled doing what I'm doing now instead of taking care of patients, is because I still get to build relationships with people.
It's interesting. There's two things you said that I actually talk about in my I Need Patients Yesterday course, which essentially teaches like, what is your natural sales style and how do you connect with people from that space? And then how do you actually talk to people? And that's one of the things I mentioned is like, when you understand their pain point, it's not the one elevator pitch. It's speaking to their pain point and how it's real to them. And once they can click they make that click in their mind, they're like, oh, this makes more sense. And the other thing I like is, you said you really like taking care of patients. You like the relationship building, and that in a way, these sales and this marketing and these connections have kind of it's like an extension of the care, because if you can let more people know that DPC exists, and that's what I want people to understand. It's like, it's an extension, because you're now saying, I can really help you. But in order for them to know you even exist, because you're new and maybe they don't know who you are, you have to go out and show your face like you're sharing right now. And so I really like that you brought that up, because I think, like you said, a lot of people, it's like pulling teeth. They don't want to do the marketing. They don't want to do the sales. But the minute you decided to open a practice, unintentionally stepped into entrepreneurship. And now for the very beginning, when it's just you have to do all these things to be able to grow. And the practices I see struggle the most, when I ask them, try to identify why they're struggling, it's because they're waiting in their practice for people to just Google them or find them, or they put a couple of videos here and there, but they're not really getting out. I will die on this rock. I say it every single time. The fastest way to grow is in-person sales, in my opinion, going out, meeting people. And I always tell people, be nice to everyone, because you never know if that person will recommend you to somebody else that may need you. So exactly what you were saying. So I like that.
Absolutely. And I always go into every networking meeting hoping just to meet somebody new, because I hate those sleazy people where you walk up to them and they're like, here's my business card, send me business. It's like, I don't know who you are, dude. It's all about learning from somebody else and helping them, right? Maybe you know somebody they need to know, whether that's a marketer or a plumber or who knows what. I always like to go into networking meetings thinking, how can I help someone in this meeting, instead of who can help me? And I think that really has helped me to be successful.
I love that. Do you feel like a majority of your patient panel is individuals or businesses? Tell me a little bit, because I assume if you're going to networking, you probably come across business owners as well. Tell me, what have you noticed with your patient panel?
Yeah, so we take care of individuals and families as well as local businesses. So we take care of about 100 different businesses throughout the northern Texas area. But when you look at our patient numbers, it's about a 65-35 split, in that 65% are individuals and families, and then 35% are businesses. And so I would love to flip that, but advertising and marketing to business owners can be very difficult. There's oftentimes a gatekeeper that won't let you through the front door. And also, business owners are busy and they do not want to talk about healthcare because it's so overwhelming for the most part. It is expensive. They don't know how it works. They don't understand it. And trying to tell them like, no, we're actually easy. We don't have a contract. I don't need a census. It's only $65 a month. Like it's really okay. But getting them to listen to that, because they're so ingrained into how terrible health insurance is, that they won't even talk to us. And so we have to get through the front door. And so that's where I find building those relationships over a luncheon at the chamber or at a networking meeting over coffee. And then I set up a one-to-one meeting with them later. That's where those connections really come from.
How do you successfully set up the one-to-ones after you meet them?
Yeah, so a lot of it's follow-up, right? So I will always ask for their card. Even if they ask for my card first, I want their card, because then I have some sort of control. If I'm just waiting for them to email me, that doesn't do me any good. So even if they don't have a card and it's someone that I, A, think is a cool person, I want to hang out with them, or B, I think that there is some sort of way we can have some sort of mutual referral relationship, even if they don't have a card, I will write down their email address in my phone or something. And then I follow up, and I have a CRM system set up that helps me along that way. I didn't always. I started with just me, but now I do have a marketing team that can build those emails on the backside. But oftentimes it's just me sending an email like, hey, it was great to meet you at the chamber today. I would love to set up a time. Here's my calendar link. Do not send an email that says, let me know a good day and time for you. There's nothing that annoys me more, and I will not respond to you. My friends, if you don't have a calendar link, you need to stop this podcast right now. Go look up Calendly or whatever the other calendar worlds are out there. It is not hard, my friends. So if you take nothing else from this, get a calendar link. It'll save your life.
Oh, yeah. It makes a difference. I took the whole contact form off my website a while back and only put my calendar link. I realized I got more people to show up when I had a link because they found a time that worked for them. And then on top of that, you can set up the automations, which people don't really know how to fully leverage Calendly, but you can actually set up multiple automations where it reminds them and it reminds them right before. So they show up. And I also was able to close more people. I wasn't chasing them constantly to like, hey, what time is a good time for you? Like you're saying. And so I actually don't even use my contact form. Like I don't have a contact form on my website anymore. It's like book a call and we will chat. Like that was, I felt like the most successful thing. So I definitely attest to that.
Yes. Get a calendar link, my friends.
I like that you mentioned ask for the card. And I also follow up. I always tell people, and it's probably even more now, but previously, before how much we're drenched in content these days, I used to be like 7 to 8 touches. Now I've been saying this lately. I have a link tracker on my website. And I will say I've had some people visit my website 18 times before they book a call. So like just to be able to see like that journey for someone to keep going and reading and still deciding, it like really shows how much it even takes for them to make that decision. And I can also see if they go, because I have trackers on everything. I can see like if they came from like a podcast, if they came from my website, if they downloaded my book. And so I can see how many touch points of all the content. And I was once asked a few years back about like lead magnets and freebies, which at the time I was like, well, I didn't really have a good way of marketing that, but I think a great way is creating kind of a freebie. Let's talk about the business owners, like, hey, this is how you can save money. Download, like on your employer's page, like learn how DPC can save you money. Like people then can kind of read that. It's just another touch point of education, of like kind of getting people to start warming up and also showing them like how you can help them. Because I always tell people, yes, you left probably the insurance world because you were burnt out and exhausted. But unfortunately, the non-medical people like myself, I don't want to sound rude. It's not that we don't care because we never understood anyway, sadly, what you went through. But more than anything, we're going through our own struggles and we want to know, how do you fit into our story? How do you help us get the care that we need? And unfortunately, when I read these websites they throw all the services on there, there's no pain points, there's no touch points. And so unfortunately, like people aren't converting. And I actually have a free video on YouTube called How to Create a High Converting Website. So if y'all want to go check that out, y'all should. It's free. And it's literally gives people ideas like how the journey should feel for someone to want to reach out. Most of our clients get like 2 to 4 times more engagement than typical healthcare websites because of the way we create those emotional connections. I know you said you had bootstrapped your website when you first got started. At what point did you end up maybe rebranding, if you did? And what did it look like in the beginning when you first created your website for those that are maybe in a position where maybe they are having to DIY it?
Yeah, I created my website on GoDaddy, and that's just because it was the most easy thing, the easiest option back in 2019. I've heard that GoDaddy is not great, especially for like SEO reasons, but I didn't know that at the time. And so I created something that would work, right? It wasn't perfect, but it was done. And so it held me through for about the first 2.5 years. So 2.5 years in, we moved to a new location and we did a rebrand where we changed our logo. I actually paid someone to make my logo instead of some $5 thing on, I don't even know, maybe Fiverr. And so it was at that point I started working with a website designer, and it was because we had no SEO. Like it was awful. And so trying to find some sort of organic traffic, as much as people, like I said, are not Googling direct primary care, you still have to show up, right? You still have to show up in Google. And so it was at that point I started working with my marketing team about 2.5 years in. And that's when they redesigned my entire website, moved it over to, I want to say Wix, maybe. I don't know. That's not my MO there.
You're like, that's not my thing. I use Wix. I'm like a diehard. I've been on Wix since 2009 for 15 years. I've like gone through all their upgrades. I noticed like a trend of more people trying to DIY their websites. And I created a whole entire course of like, how do you use AI to create a logo that looks somewhat professional? And how do you use ChatGPT or another one called Claude to write your copywriting? And I teach them things on like what to think of when they're writing and then how to create the website from zero. And I also offer template options if people want to buy those. But the reason I did that is because I know sometimes when you're starting, you don't always have a budget, or maybe you don't even really know what you need. And so that was like my way of kind of like saying, hey, as much as I'd love to work with you, I know I can't win them all. So this was like a way I created a course to kind of help people when they are starting to make their website. And I do like that you kind of mentioned the search engine optimization. I do think, obviously I always tell people to rank for direct primary care. Those keywords is actually very easy because there's not a lot of competition for those key terms, but people obviously would have to know what is direct primary care. But where I do see is like people wanting to rank for like primary care or those type of keywords obviously have a lot more competition. And so working with someone that understands like what to rank for, understands what is being searched for, and doing those analysis are very helpful to try to start working that not only in your copywriting, but also in the back end of the other things that SEO entails. Tell me a little bit. Do you see after you did the rebrand, did you feel like it was helping you convert more? Did you feel like more people were finding you organically? Did you feel like the investment made sense for you?
I think that's hard to tell. And I think that's because ROI is so hard to calculate now. It's no longer like, oh, I did this Facebook ad and it brought me 7 conversions. So much of it is brand awareness, and people hear about you from their cousin and then from the lady down the street. And then it's not until their kid actually gets sick that they call us. So that was really the thing that led them to our website. And so there's so many different touch points that I can't say, yes, it all of a sudden like brought us all this flood, this influx. But I will tell you, people know us, people know who we are. And so making sure that you have a solid website and social proof that you are a human being is so important. And whether that's through a great website, a great social media presence, whatever that looks like, people just need to know you're human. They will do business with people they know, like, and trust. And if they can't do those things with you, they are clicking somewhere else. People also have a lot of decision fatigue. So making it very clear to people what you can do for them, how you can help them, and what benefits they get from working with you is very, like, it's an absolute must, because putting a bunch of fluff on there, it's a waste of your time because nobody's reading it. I mean, the attention span of people is so short now. You've got to like blow off their socks before they get a chance to run. I can't say that I all of a sudden was like blowing up, but it definitely was helpful from a brand awareness standpoint. And we've just continued to grow in people know who we are now.
That's actually funny. The sick comment. That's actually how I became a DPC patient. I knew DPC for a while. My cousin started DPC in Wichita Falls, Texas. That's how I got into DPC in 2016. And I, for a long time, I was kind of the child from a self-employed father, which I've talked about, was like, you don't go to the doctor unless you're dying. And so that's like literally how I was raised. And one day I was like, why am I making myself suffer if I can go to DPC and become a patient? Because I was sick for I had like a fever for like a week, and I finally went. And I was like, why am I killing myself here not going to the doctor? So then I signed up, became a patient. I've been a DPC patient since. So that's what I try to tell people. They're not going to maybe always sign up right away, which then leads to your second comment, which you didn't word it this way, but essentially the multi-channel, like people coming from the friend and then maybe watching a video and then maybe going to the website. And so creating, like you said, all the different touch points that we mentioned earlier is so important, because people sometimes think, oh, well, they didn't sign up the first time. They don't do any follow-up. They don't reach out. They don't have some system in place, and it makes it harder to be able to convert people later. And if they already showed interest one time, I tell people, if they already showed interest that one time, why are you not nurturing the person that already showed interest versus always trying to generate new business? Because that's also exhausting. That is something I think, especially when you are wanting to scale, the multi-channel really makes a big difference. And I know we talked about lightly just the fact that you did scale, you did open these 3 different practices. You do have about 10 different employees at this point. Can you talk about a little bit about the scaling journey? Was it just, I know you mentioned the growth aspect of just like, oh, we're growing so quickly here. Let's open a second location. And then you also acquired the third location. But tell me a little bit as you began to step out. I know this is a question people often have, like, no one's going to care like I do, or no one's going to do it like I do. And so that sometimes holds them back from the scaling and the growth. Can you speak a little bit to that?
100%. So last year, about this time, so I had been out of the clinic for about 4 or 5 months, and there was just something going wrong. Like people just weren't doing what they were supposed to. And part of it was I just assumed everyone's like me, right? Everyone treats patients exactly like I do. And so I met with my leadership team at the time, and we thought it was a lack of understanding of job descriptions. Yeah, it turns out it was a lack of values. And so I call him my success coach because he's not really a business coach, consultant. I don't know. He's just awesome. And so we basically boiled it down to 6 values that our staff has to live and breathe and die on. And so we had a come to Jesus day, basically. And we're like, all right, guys, this is what we do. This is how we live and breathe and act at this business. And if you can't do this, there's the front door. It quickly changed the way people approach things. And it made it easier to have these discussions with people when they weren't doing things appropriately. Especially as healthcare providers, my staff tend to be gentle, right? You can't go to them and be like, dude, you screwed this up. They will sob. Like they're very kind-hearted people. You have to approach it in a very nice way. And so if somebody responds to a patient inappropriately, but it doesn't coincide with value number 2, then it's easy to go and be like, hey, this response, it's fine, but that's not the Impact Family Wellness way. That's the, big giant conglomerate healthcare system down the street. That's how they would respond to that. That's not what we do here. According to value number 2, we are customer obsessed, and this is what we do. We actually just yesterday had another values day with my entire staff. We went over every value, we read it word for word, and then gave examples of how we do it versus how other people do it. Just as a reminder, like this is what we do, because you're exactly right. Nobody is me. Nobody is Monica, although I wish there were 20 of me because we would grow much faster. It was really boiling down to making sure we understood the values that everyone lives and breathes by. And so those values are the first thing that is sent to any employee that is potentially getting interviewed for hire. And if they are not 100% on board with all 6 of them, there's zero chance of an interview.
I want to take it back a little bit further. Let's talk about the first person you hired and starting to let go of that control.
Yeah. So the good news is when I hired nurse practitioners, giving away the control wasn't too bad because they were their patients. And I was like, you can kind of treat them how you want. It was really giving up control when I hired my first administrative person because that was jobs I did and no one else can do, right? And so learning to delegate and not micromanage was very difficult for me. I micromanaged her for at least the first full year. It was like, hey, can you do this and this? But not that one. You're going to have to ask me about that part. And it drove her insane to the point that she was ready to leave. She was just done. And then worked once again with my success coach, and he was like, Monica, you've got to let these people do their thing. And so basically changed her role from being a problems person where she would bring me problems to being a solutions person where she would bring me solutions. And by allowing her to do her job, she has flourished and stepped up like none other, to the point that I honestly don't know what goes on all day at my office. All the day-to-day is run by my operations manager, and she's absolutely incredible. So giving people the ability to do their job and let them do it well and focus on their strengths and give up the power, as much as it's hard, find somebody who's better at it than you. That is the key to hiring, is finding somebody who can do it better than you.
I like that. I like that. I think a lot of us go through those growing pains when we are trying to scale. And similar advice I'd gotten was you have to trust the people you hire, which is scary because you're afraid of the quality control going down. So I like how you guys found the cause and then created the 6 values. I think that's awesome, kind of setting a tone of like what how we work here and what we expect. Can you tell me, for those that are listening, what advice would you give to someone that's just starting or someone that is struggling?
Yeah. It can be a lonely, lonely world starting a new business. Starting a business is hard, but growing one is even harder. And so I think my biggest piece of advice would be that things don't have to be perfect, they just have to be done. So your logo doesn't have to be amazing from day one. Your website doesn't have to be perfect. You can change it. You can update it. You can get it. You can change it how it needs to be done, but it just has to get out there into the world. And so stop trying to be a perfectionist and just do it. Because if you just sit here, nothing's going to happen. You're going to continue being burnout. You're going to continue to not make any sort of movement. So find the baby steps, finish each little project, and move forward.
Tell me a little bit about how you help and support the community these days.
Oh man, I am the president of 2 different nonprofit boards. I am volunteering in all sorts of places and just showing up for people to help represent them. I'm actually the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and so I do a lot of speeches and talks, but I also do a lot of talks in the community in terms of educating people on all sorts of things. So I've done talks to realtors about how to deal with stress. This Friday, I talked to a group of seniors because it's National Relaxation Day. And so we're going to talk about stress and sleep and the things that you can do to help with that. So I do a lot of presentations to PTAs and just different places all over the community to help educate them on anything from stress to being a business owner to healthcare things. I do a lot of talks on hormones, especially when it comes to women and that whole perimenopause world. So those are my favorite, is to get involved and do those sorts of talks and make sure that we can keep our community as healthy as they can.
That's awesome. And then tell me a little bit. I think you mentioned you wrote a book and you also have a course where you teach other people how to begin their practice.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my husband and I had talked about opening a new practice every year for 10 years. And so I actually went on an entrepreneur competition that is nationally televised called The Blocks. I was on season 18, and spoiler alert, I actually won. I was the winner of season 18 and I won $10,000. You can go watch it, search for The Blocks. And I came home from that and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go balls to the wall. I have to do all these things. And I made myself physically ill because I was measuring my success by what I thought everyone else thought I needed to do. And so a lot of therapy and a lot of journaling later. And I realized that success is not 5 offices or a certain number of patients or a certain revenue number. Success to me is having time with my family and doing the things that I want to do. And so the idea of impacting healthcare by opening 10 practices was no longer an option. And so I had to rethink, like, how can I continue my impact beyond these 3 clinic locations? And the way I felt that I can do that best is by educating other healthcare providers of how they can do exactly what I have done. So I did. I recently published a book. It's called DPC, Dream Job or Total Disaster. It is not a how-to start a DPC. It is a should you. It is a gut check. Like, are you the right person to be an entrepreneur to do this? And if you're not, that's fine. Being an employed healthcare provider is perfect for some people. That's what we need. But if you're that person that wants to drive your own practice and lead your own way, then that's who that book is for. So at the end of the book, you should be able to decide, yep, DPC, that's the way to go, or no, I'm going to stay an employed provider. And if the answer is yes, I want to do this, then I've created an online course. It's a launch kit that is really from idea to launch. And so it gets you through how to establish an LLC, where to get a bank account, what kind of lease do you need, all the things that you need. And then I also offer online consulting. And so it's really just my way to make a bigger impact in the world without losing my mind, because I'm not willing to do that.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you gave such helpful insight today, and I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining today's podcast. I will link a few resources if you want to learn more about Monica and her book. You can find that in the description. And also I'll link my DIY course, my sales course, and if you'd like to book a free discovery call, I'll drop that in there as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to be a resource. This is why this podcast was created, to help clinicians who are starting their practice, their cash pay practice, on ways that they can market and grow.